Unlike some of the other people here, I am not a vet or a scientist, but I've worked my entire life with horses and for some of the top trainers in Ireland. About 5 years ago, I started looking into the environment in which horses were housed and how the light affects them. And it was commonly known that light is used to cycle mares to bring mares into season. And it occurred to me that if the mare is a seasonal breeder, then why is the male horse not a seasonal breeder? And I watched a documentary where I saw feral horses where the stallions were happily grazing beside the mares. And the more I looked into it, I found some research that had been done that would suggest that the stallions were actually shut down the same as the mares were, insofar as horses have only two things on the mind, which is reproduction and survival, and they're not stupid. And the stallion is not going to risk injury by chasing mares that are not receptive, and he's not going to waste energy at a time when he has no nutrition available. So we done some tests, and we found that light increased testosterone. And testosterone is an anabolic steroid which increases muscle mass. So basically, I had a hard time to convince any trainers to try what was just an idea at the time. And some of them dismissed me outright, wouldn't speak to me, and some of them went so far as to laugh at me. So I convinced one trainer in the UK who's a vet and known for being a forward thinker, and he said that he would try it. And there's a race called the Brocklesby Stakes, which is the first 2-year-old race of the year. This man is a top trainer, and in 28 years he had never won the Brocklesby Stakes. The first year using my light system, he not only won the Brocklesby Stakes, but he won the first 3 2-year-old races of the year and won a Group 1 2-year-old race that year. A lot of people then, of course, said it was a fluke. That man came out the following year, won the Brocklesby Stakes again, and won 4 of the first 5 2-year-old races of the year, and had another Group 1 2-year-old winner that year. He now trains all of his horses on my system. So then I convinced another very top trainer in Ireland. Sorry, this slide here will show you. This is the before and after. So this is full spectrum light, just in comparison to what would be normal light. And the reason why you think that the lights above look very yellow, and that is because the human eye filters yellow light. Well, if you were looking at this in the yard, it doesn't look yellow. But if you look here at my light, but you can see the outside lights, they're still yellow. Because humans have evolved to sleep by a fire. We need to produce melatonin to sleep. So we have learned to filter yellow light so that we can sleep by an open fire. So that's why it looks so yellow. It's not trick photography. So this is the wavelength of the light, and I have the wavelength of the red light. So this is the natural daylight. You can see that natural daylight peaks, 100% peaks at 450, 60 nanometer wavelength. Incandescent bulbs have much less blue, very little, that's why they're more yellow. Fluorescent lights, believe it or not, are the worst type you can use. They have practically no blue. And this is my light, which is full spectrum, but peaks in the same peak as natural daylight. So this is the difference between a world top manufacturers, what they market as daylight bulbs, daylight fluorescence tubes. And you can still see they're still yellow in comparison to my light, which has a high element of blue. So this also demonstrates that for rented stables, rented yards, rented stud farms, it's not necessary to actually remove the existing lights. So in this situation, we have installed the lights alongside the existing lights. It takes 5 minutes to remove them if someone was moving premises. So this is the process of dimming down and dimming up. So the reason for this is, there's 2 reasons. Well, unlike cortisol and adrenaline and those hormones that are immediate response, we're looking at melatonin being a gradual response that rises and falls over a period of time, which is actually sunrise and sunset. So we create a sunrise and a sunset. So we lower and we raise the melatonin as it would in the natural environment, which is outdoors. The light will dim down and will turn red. and the red will stay on all night. So now we can manage horses under the red light. We don't need to switch on lights if you want to check rugs or you want to water horses or just check horses. You don't need to disturb them anymore. And the horses, when you go out to check them under this red light, they won't even look up at you. So this shows that melatonin rises under the red light the same as it would in dark. And this study was done in comparison of horses in the dark and under the red light, and then just for good measure they were switched around and the study was done again. So it shows that melatonin, red light is equal to dark, if not actually better, for production of melatonin. So this shows the gradual dim down. The light will dim from full down, and eventually it will go pink, and then it will turn to red, and in the morning it will do the opposite. It then has a emergency override where you can override the system at a touch of a button if you had a horse cast or colicking or anything like that. So strangely enough, trainer Mark Johnson made a statement. He's a qualified vet as well as a top trainer, and he made a statement that he appeared to have eliminated ringworm from the yard, which came as a very big surprise to me. So I told another trainer who was about this, and he thought it was interesting, but rang me 3 weeks later to say, you can tell Mark Johnson he's wrong, because I have ringworm in the yard. So I went from 6 foot tall to 3 foot tall, in a matter of a few minutes. The trainer then met me at the races and informed me that the 4 horses that had the ringworm had broken out about 2 weeks after they arrived at his yard, and in actual fact they were the only ones in the yard that had been affected, and it hadn't spread to any of the other horses despite them being in American barns. So I thought it was interesting enough to go to the Irish Equine Centre with, and so when we went to the Irish Equine Centre, they decided it was worth carrying out a study. So we have it here somewhere. So in a study that we done with 58 2-year-olds in training, all in the same yard, we took some samples of bacteria and fungus, and the fungus was the reason we were doing it, and they said we might as well do bacteria just for no particular reason. We find a dramatic difference in the fungus and bacteria, in particularly after 8 weeks. So the fungus didn't really surprise us, because we know that fungus doesn't like light, and it prefers dark and moist conditions, but the bacteria was a somewhat pleasant surprise. So basically, attention to detail, as the champion trainer says, is most important, and every little thing are marginal gains. So if we look at the horses in the, my slides are all over the place, these were 58 2-year-olds in training, and they were all in the same yard, on the same feed, same bedding, same staff looking after them, absolutely nothing different, only the light. And you'll see here, these are 3-week steps in their progress. They're breeze-up horses, so they're all early born, precocious type 2-year-olds that are ready to breeze up. And you'll see here that, just here, you will see that when the fast work came, right at the start of April, when they got a couple of pieces of fast work, the group without the light dropped away, and then 3 weeks later they had recovered. But you then have a straight line here, where you have made no progress in 6 weeks. The group here with the light have made significant progress in the same 6 weeks. So the horses went off to the sales, and they went to all different sales in different countries, different places, and were sold to different people, and they were distributed far and wide. And we watched then the progression, and as we progressed, we saw that by the time that this group here had a runner, its first runner, this group had 6 runners, and that in itself was a significant stat. But the 6 runners produced 5 winners and a second, and 3 Royal Ascot runners. So that was fairly significant. So to date, the horses trained in this system have won 60 Group 1 races. We currently have 12 of the top 20 time form rated 2-year-olds in Europe on the system. We've topped 8 sales from very limited opportunities, including a 1.4 million breeze-up horse that was bought for $16,000, and a 1.5 million yearling in Newmarket 2 weeks ago. Last weekend alone, in the two Group 1 race for 2-year-olds, horses trained on my system finished 1st, 2nd, 4th and 5th in the fillies mile, and in the colts race we finished 1st, 2nd, 3rd, 4th and 5th. We've also had 4 Breeders' Cup winners in the USA. So another trainer this year that's just started using this system is Carl Burke, and Carl Burke has had 2 Group 1 and 2-year-olds this year. So there's definitely an improvement in the strength and the growth of the horse. And if you look into some of the studies that have been done into, for example, thoroughbred horse in Australia are bigger than the USA, who in turn are bigger than Ireland and the UK. And incidentally, the only other horse in the study were Indians, and they were very small. But they were by Irish stallions, out of mares by Irish stallions, etc. So why would they be smaller? It's because of their environment. And basically, if you look at the reason or the connection between the Australian horses being so big, but the shortest day in Australia is 10 hours and 40 minutes. The shortest day in Kentucky is 9 hours and 40 minutes. The shortest day in Ireland is 7.5 hours. So what we aim to try and do, or what I aimed at trying to do, was to put in the correct intensity, the correct wavelength, and the correct duration of light. So what we do is we have to also manage the stables, so the stables has to be managed. So we take a short day of 6 a.m. to 6 p.m. and that would be in December, for example. We then start from the shortest day of the year, December 22nd, we start going forward by 3 minutes a day. This takes the horse 6 weeks forward. When we reach March equinox, March 22nd, equal light, we have already reached that 42 days earlier. We then reach the long day of June 22nd, 42 days earlier. So our horses are 42 days ahead coming to spring and summer. For the long day of the year in June, we sit for 42 days and we let nature have a 42-day head start. We then start to drop 3 minutes a day, heading towards the winter. The result then will be we'll reach September equinox 42 days late and reach winter's day in December and then begin the cycle again. So what we create is a different season completely for the horse. The horse has only 2 seasons, not 4, so they have long day and they have short day. For 6 months of the year there's more light than dark, and for the other 6 months there's more dark than light, with only 2 days ever equal. So basically we have altered that to have 9 months of the long day, 3 months of the short day, so we're reducing the effects of winter. There will be other advantages we have found, anecdotally reported back from the clients, was increased appetite, increased hoof growth, and obviously better coats, better coat condition. But the racecourse results seem to be very good. We have about 70% of the top stallions in Ireland using the system now, and they've all tried it on 1 or 2 and come back, and some of the major studs now have all of their stallions on this. They're now beginning in the studs to use this on their maiden mares, which is a traditional thing, but obviously it's bringing just a little bit more technology to an old-fashioned system of just having your lights on a timer. But now the latest thing they're doing now is that they're starting to put their pregnant mares on, and now we have weanlings using the system, and we'll have an idea now from an owner breeder to use lighting system from the entire career of the horse, from conception right through the racing career. Now this way you can manipulate the seasons twice in any year. You can gain a marginal advantage in the spring and you can gain a marginal advantage in the autumn. But you have 11 opportunities to do it in the horse's career. If you take from conception through lactation, which is another thing, improved lactation. So you're putting your early born foal with the mother back on light while the mother's lactating, and you're giving the January born foal an equal chance that the April born foal would have. But you put them on a different program. But we have programs for all different types of horses. So the system, the running cost of the system, believe it or not, is in the region of about 40 pence per week. That's all it costs to run. And the evidence back from the clients is that they seem to like it. Everything is positive. We've had no negative feedback to date. So it would appear that growth hormones and fertility hormones are linked, and that the optimal growth would occur when the horse has a perception of the availability of nutrition rather than the availability of nutrition. Because it's like my friend said, the horse doesn't know the Red Mills lorry is on its way. So Equilux performance lighting will now be Equilux stable environment systems, because to add to this lighting system I've now developed, and it was interesting, one of the last speakers, we've developed 2 systems for air quality. Automatic fogging system, which fogs the stable and brings down the dust after mucking out, and also an automated ventilation system which changes the air in the stable 8 times a day, as well as on demand after mucking out. So they'll be launching in the next 3 to 4 weeks. Thank you very much. Thank you. Oh, sorry.